Hey guys, Adam Fennig here with Fennig Equipment, and today we're going to do a webinar talking about planter fertilizer systems. This time of year we get a lot of questions about how to do a 2x2 system. What's the best pump to use? What should my rates be? What's the best coulter to use? And at Fennig Equipment, being that we not only sell the tanks, the pumps, the check valves, the orifices, the 2x2 coulter, the Keaton seed firmer, because we sell all of those things, we can set up a complete system. We don't just sell you the pump and say, well, good luck finding the coulter, or just sell you the Keaton seed firmer and say, well, I don't really know what pump to use with it. We can do the turnkey system. We can sell you that totally tubular in furrow, and then we can also sell you that 7-gallon a minute Delavan pump, and we can run it through a micro track or whatever you want to run it with. So I'm going to try to answer a lot of questions, hopefully get your guys' minds going here quite a bit. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here so we can flip over to the PowerPoint that I've got. Okay, so we're going to talk about planter fertilizer, tanks, pumps, in furrow, 2x2, and everything along those lines. You guys, if you follow our Facebook, our YouTube, our Twitter, you've probably likely seen some projects we've done in the past. I've been posting a lot of pictures of the tanks and the tank brackets. And, you know, I want to talk to you guys about what we do differently here at Fennig Equipment. I briefly touched on it there, but mainly we're a full service center. So we offer Surefire pumps and Surefire kits. We offer the Yetter coulters, the Martin coulters, the Keaton and the totally tubular. It's hard to find a company that offers the tanks, the pumps, the orifices, everything in-house. And that's really what makes us different. Not only that, but our knowledge. If any of you guys know Kurt, Kurt is our main go-to for our planter fertilizer systems. He helps basically draw it out, lay it out, figure out what pump that we need to use, what controller we need to use, and his knowledge is tough to beat. And then we've got Mitch, who does a lot of the brackets. We make the custom tank brackets to hold all of these tanks, whether it's a 150-gallon wing tank or a 300-gallon out the back. There's not a lot of options offered from the factory, especially if you own a red planter. So we are here to help you guys not only maximize your fertilizer carrying capacity, but we want to set up your planter that is 100% custom to your farm. Maybe you've got a 450-gallon tank on there for 2x2, but you want to add some in furrow. There's not a lot of options out there. So that's what we do. We carry Ace, John Blue, High Pro pumps, and we'll dig into that here in a little bit. We offer a lot of in-furrow options, Keaton and totally tubular. We offer multiple 2x2 options, the Yetter, the Martin, and several others, and we'll get into that here a little bit. So I want to go ahead and jump in right away. You know, this is a question that we get a lot, and the pump that you pick is very important, but it's not so much about what pump do I use, it's more about what do I want to achieve. If you are looking to do variable rate, or if you want to change your rates on the fly, or you want to have section control, that is going to dictate which pump you use. Not quite as much as your rates and things like that. Granted, your rates do come into play. We're not going to use a 7-gallon a minute pump for doing a 40-foot planter at 20 gallon a minute. Simply won't push it. So when guys say, well, what pump do I start with? I say, well, what do you want to do? On an in-furrow system, if you just want to manage your pressure and then do the math equation of your pressure, your speed, and your rate, and you would regulate your flow and your pressure across the system with orifices, a simple ground drive pump or a 7-gallon a minute Delavan electric pump will get you by. If you want to do automatic section control and you want to run it through a John Deere rate controller or something like that, we're going to have to go with a hydraulic pump, throw in a flow meter, section valves, and of course some type of John Deere liquid rate controller to put it through your 2630. There are also several different rate controller options that we'll talk about here in a little bit. But basically your pump options boil down to this: hydraulic pump, electric pump, and ground driven pump. On the ground driven side, we offer a John Blue DP43. That thing can put out 5.3 gallons per acre, or sorry, per minute. And to do the equation there, a lot of guys get confused. So let's run through a quick equation. Let's say on an in-furrow system, you're running 5 gallons per acre and you're driving 5.5 miles an hour and you're on 30 inches. So the math equation there is you take your gallons per acre, 5, times your speed, 5.5, times your spacing, which would be 30 inches. You get 825. You divide that by 5940, and that gets you your gallons per minute per row of water. Now, fertilizer is heavier than water. I take it times 1.13, and I get out 0.56 gallons per minute per row. Now, this is how you figure out which pumps can work for you, and it's how you figure out your orifices. So if you want to run a 7 gallon a minute pump on this system on a 12 row, you would have to take it times 12 rows because we calculated 1 row, and I get 1.83. So obviously a 7 gallon a minute pump, which, let me back up, technically can only push 5.5 gallons, can easily handle that because we're only calling for 1.8. So in that system, if it's a 12 row planer doing 5.5 miles an hour planting speed, 5 gallons per acre through the in-furrow system, we can run a simple electric pump, or of course that John Blue DP43. At that point, you would basically just control your pressure. We can run that electric one through a micro track screen, and you can have a screen in your cab to control it. Or on that DP43, which is ground driven, you just simply set your pressure according to the orifices that you're using, and your rates will be accurate. On the hydraulic side, hydraulic pumps are awesome. They last a long time. If something fails, they're easy to rebuild. They can put out a lot of product. It's very rare that you max out a hydraulic pump. The downside to a hydraulic pump, though, is having enough hydraulic ports to use one. Typically today with our planers, we've got our outlets maxed out on the tractor, so we may have to tie into that CCS fan if you have one, or just flat out get creative with how we're running our hydraulics. So those are some things to consider when you're choosing the pump that you're after. Typically in a 2x2 scenario, if you're wanting to do sections, look at a hydraulic pump. If you're not wanting to do sections, look at a ground drive, John Blue, maybe a 4055 series. In furrow, I would look at the DP43 or the electric 7 gallon per minute. Here's some pictures of some different pump setups. This right here is a DP43. That's our John Blue 5.3 gallons per acre. And you can see right here, let me grab. You can see right here, this handle, that is our pressure regulator. So basically, whenever I did that math equation earlier, I did 5 gallon per acre times 5.5 times 30 inches divided by 5940 times 1.13, and I get that 0.156. That's per row. So whenever I look at an orifice chart, I find that number at the 20 PSI. I want to run this system always at 20 PSI. The reason we do 20 PSI is because it's enough to open up our check valves. It's enough to push the product through, but it's not too much to be overloading a system. So we always run 20 PSI. So basically what you do is you turn this regulator valve handle to 20 PSI, and whenever you put that correct orifice in there, no matter what your speed is, your speed will change your flow, but no matter when you're driving across the field, if you maintain that speed and pressure, you're going to be putting out the same amount. I always urge everyone to do a catch test on all of these systems while it's sitting in the shed right now. Now is a great time to simply get a calibration jug, which you'll see here in a little bit. Stick it under that Keaton seed firmer, stick it under your 2x2, catch it for a minute, calculate the distance you would have traveled, and do the math there to make sure that it's spitting out. There's no reason why you should go to the field the first day of planning and be spitting out the incorrect rate, because you can test these systems sitting in your shop today. So there's no reason to go to the field and say, well, my orifice is wrong. Well, we've had plenty of time here to be checking and calibrating. So I urge everyone to calibrate your pump, your planner, your side dress applicator right now, because you still have time to get some different orifices if you need them. Again, ground driven pump. This is a DP43 on a Case IH planner. Sometimes we do have to get a ground drive pump kit to actually run off of that tire. This is an L&D Ag ground drive pump system. We just used the DP43 mounted on top of that, ran our sprocket off of that tire to get a simple system. Here's the video that I want to show everyone of a 1770 that we did. Real quick, I want to pause this because if you look, you can see another ground drive system, but it's a little bit different. Right here, that is a John Blue 4055 pump, and it also has a John Blue DP43. So what we're doing here is we're piggybacking two pumps off of the same ground drive contact wheel. Right there's the contact wheel. It's spinning this, which is driving a in-furrow system and a 2x2 system. What we did on this particular planner is we added this 300-gallon rear mount tank on this 1770. He already had this front tank. We added this one out the back to add another one. So I will let this video keep playing so you can watch a little bit about it. Yeah, so that 450 gallon is running his 2x2. That's a factory tank. A lot of you guys with 1770s probably have that. What we can do on those planners is, I think the camera goes around and looks at it, but this is a very common mount right here, is our 300 gallon out the back. So yeah, I mean, again, well, I've got a lot of videos out here of projects that Kurt and Mitch have put together, but if you are at home and you have a 1770 and you want to get some more capacity, that 300 gallon is a phenomenal option. And I really like what it does. Here's another video of, again, a factory 450 with a 300 gallon that we put out the back for in-furrow, running Keaton seat and firmers. Here's something I want to show you real quick before that gets going. Look at this red ball system. He's got two red ball systems, one for 2x2, one for the in-furrow. But I'll dig into this a little bit later as well. But I just want to walk you through quickly our system, how we go through the system from the tank down to the opener or the Keaton seed firmer, what we do is we go from the tank, obviously then to the pump. From the pump, we go directly into the red balls. We do not use those distribution manifolds, those cast manifolds that come on the planters from the factory. Several reasons. Those things are a plugging nightmare. Number two, you do not need them. Number three, the red balls are a much better option. So we go from the tank to the pump. From the pump, we go directly into the red balls. There's a T. The red balls will sit like this. We come in the bottom, and then we leave the red balls with each individual 3/8 or half-inch tube, and we go from the red ball directly down to the row. Now, we do have a check valve in line to keep it from dribbling down. But what I'm saying is what sets up our systems differently from a lot of factory ones and some other ones you may see is we don't use manifolds. Our red ball system does two things for us. It monitors row blockage, and it also serves as our manifold. So you don't need it. They're a much more cost-effective option than that manifold, and they plug a lot less as well. So again, this was another piggyback system. We ran the DP43 off of his existing John Blue pump. It's a real common way to do it. So basically he's just setting pressure, and his rates, he's got a gauge right here on those red balls that tells him his pressure all the time. As long as he stays driving at that speed, and as long as his pressure stays the same on that gauge, his rates will be locked in across the entire field. So again, he's got a factory tank on there. So whenever we do in-furrow systems, we leave the red balls with a 1/4-inch air line. And whenever we do a 2x2, we either leave it with a 1/2-inch or a 3/8, depending on the knife. So talking about some 2x2 options. So we talked earlier that whenever we start getting into 2x2, our pumps typically have to change because of additional rates. So let's crunch some math here quick. If you're running 20 gallons to the acre, 5.5 miles per hour on 30 inches, divided by 5,940 times 1.13, that gets us to 0.627 per row times a 12 row. We're going to need 7.5 gallons per minute. So we're either looking at a John Blue ground driven, a big John Blue ground driven, which would be like those cast 4055s. That'll handle it no problem, or a hydraulic. There are some other ground drive options, but electric is 100% out of the question here on 2x2. And there's some other, that DP43 is out of the question. It can't handle it. So you're looking at either a ground drive cast John Blue, a big high pro pump, or a hydraulic pump. So this is a Yetter 2x2 option. I'm not going to talk too much about different Kohler options because there's a bunch of them out there. We offer the Yetter and the Martin. So this is the Yetter Nutrient Pro 4000. If you own a Case IH 2150 planter, this is a great way to go. You're going to be able to adjust this gauge wheel to control your depth, and you're going to get that fertilizer in the ground not as deep as you want it. You're not unlimited on your depth, but I'm saying you can certainly sock it in the ground 3 inches, no problem with this Kohler, which is kind of unheard of today in the fertilizer application world. Here's another option. This is the Martin UMO. So this is actually a unit mounted option. You can get this in a single or dual. It mounts right up front on your faceplate. You can see that little knife there. That's where the fertilizer comes out. That's a solid option. I've got a lot of guys running that. In fact, Mitch here at our shop, He runs the Martin dual UMOs. He gets along great with it. Great option. They even make it now where you can get a row cleaner in around those dual UMOs. Of course, the Yetter dual 2968s. These are something that we have sold a lot of. They're extremely common. They're fairly cost effective, especially for 2x2 by 2, the dual placement. Now, of course, they have the knife option available. You're not locked into just using that injector. So that knife basically rides in there right behind that coulter blade to lock that fertilizer in below the soil rather than relying on that injection system. So it's a clean option. This one works on Case 2000, Case 1200, John Deere 1770s, 7200s, 7000s, and Kinseys. So this will work on almost every planter. You can adjust the distance from the seed that these blades run. You can also adjust their depth. It's a great option. Here's another video I want to show you guys of a, we did not hang the tanks on this, but this is dual 2968s running out the back. You can see in between the gauge wheel and the closing wheel there. They also have the Yetter 2940 air adjust row cleaners. But this is a great example of maximizing your storage capacity. They've got the factory tank on that in front of the CCS tanks, and then they've got the wing tanks there. Not only does that spread out your weight, but I mean, we have a lot of weight transfer systems that are available today. And whenever you're hanging some fertilizer out there, you may not need that weight transfer system. Of course, you can see they also have some planter fertilizer hanging on the front of the tractor, which brings me to a real quick topic I want to cover, and that's tractor mounted tanks. We offer two different styles of tractor mounted tanks. We offer the fast 300-gallon front mount. It's going to run you around $2,600 to mount it out front. And then, of course, everyone has seen the Yield 360 tanks that ride on top of the front tires. We offer those as well. Those are 700-gallon tanks. I have sold some of those, and guys that have them absolutely love them. Now, granted, they are a little more money, but I really like how they're placed and how they're designed. They're around $14,000 for a kit. They fit most tractors, and man, is that a solid way to get some of that weight off your planter and back onto your tractor where it's a little more manageable. But great video here. I just wanted to show you of some different things, mainly that Yetter 2x2, which is kind of hard to see. There you can see it really well, but it just runs in between the closing wheels and the gauge wheels. So I briefly pointed out a Wilger flow indicator system. These are also called red balls. You can call them whatever you want. John Blue makes them as well, which we sell those also. Basically, all these do is they are columns. They come individually, and then you can snap them together. This is what serves as your manifold and your row blockage system. You pick what colored ball you need based on your rates and the product that you're using, because for different rates, that ball is going to go to different places within that column. So you have to pick the correct ball. Basically, right here's a picture of how we set them up. We've got the gauge here in the center, and then here's the T. So our pump, this is where we tie in from our pump. Our pump comes up in here. It tees off either direction. Fertilizer fills each column, and then we leave out the top and go directly to the row. Each row has a hose that comes out of it and goes directly to the row. So there's a lot going on here. We've got our gauge, we've got our input from the pump, we've got our fertilizer going through the column, the red ball swirling up here so we can see that it's running, and then fertilizer leaving. So a lot going on there, but that is how the red ball system works, and that's how we would set them up on your planter today. Again, I mentioned it earlier, avoid these manifolds at all costs. If you have a manifold on your planter right now, I really urge you to take it off. There's several problems with them. I mentioned that they do plug, but then whenever you manifold right here, if you want to add a red ball system, it makes it extremely tricky to do so. You would basically have to go in the bottom of each red ball individually and come out the top individually. And that's a hassle compared to the picture I just showed you there, where you just come into the bottom in one area and you leave the top going to the row. Here's a picture of the John Blue indicators. These are slightly more expensive than those clear Wilgers I showed you earlier. I do believe they handle sunlight a little bit better. They don't get quite as brittle when left outside. And of course, that most people are aware, you can also have an in-cab system on these where you've got an iPad screen in your cab and it shows you a bar graph on what these red balls are doing, so that you don't always have to be looking back to read them. This comes in handy on the big planters where you've got your red balls mounted out on the wings where you can't even see them from the dusty cab and everything going on. You can just have an iPad screen in your tractor cab to monitor the flow. This goes back to what I mentioned earlier. Get yourself a calibration jug. If you don't have a calibration jug, call Fennig Equipment. We can send you a calibration jug. They're extremely cost effective, and for what they do, they can save you a ton of money and time, whenever you get out into the field. I have it every year. Guys will go out in the field, they'll cover 20 acres and they'll call me. Hey, Adam, I think my rate's off 10 gallons. I spit out 20. I think I'm spitting out 20 gallons over this 20 acres. Things are just not adding up. Well, what's your pressure? What's your speed? What orifice do you have? And 5-10 phone calls later, we realized maybe his pressure was just a notch high or something. And we can eliminate all of that. There's a lot going on when you get that planter started on day one. Don't let your calibration be out of whack, because again, it's something you can do today sitting in your tractor cab. Catch it, measure it, and you should be able to know instantly if your rates are correct or not. And if you need help doing a calibration test, call into our office, ask for Kurt, Mitch, or Adam. We'll walk you through how to calibrate. Right here's a picture of a calibration I helped a customer with last year. These are the Yetter Dual 68s on a Case 2150 planter. So we were out running in the field and he just wasn't sure if he was getting the right rates on. We whipped out the calibration jugs, and sitting there in the field, if you're familiar with the Case, you got to have that tether button, and we did a catch test and adjusted the orifices correctly. I mean, it's a great way to do it. If you're running 2x2x2 system, so dual fertilizer, this is a great way to be 100% sure that the left and right side is getting the same amount. Yeah, we cannot forget dry fertilizer. This webinar is about fertilizer on the planter, and this is a setup that Kurt sold last year to some customers out in southeast Ohio, over near I guess it'd be Fredericktown region, maybe. So basically north and east of Columbus, I guess. But this is on a custom built planter by Ag Infotech. They're a precision dealership here in Ohio that we work with. But we put a Salford Fertigo on this planter. The Fertigo holds 4 tons, and the Fertigo meters the dry product and runs it down to a colder system. So don't forget dry product. If you guys are doing dry product of any sort, we can do that, meter that as well. Here's something that's pretty popular at Fennig Equipment as well. It's our custom built 3-point tanks. So maybe you have a Kinsey planter where you've got the 6 tanks stacked on there and there's just simply no more room for tanks. We can add a tank on your 3-point system. We've done this time and time again. This comes in handy for several different scenarios, but if you've got room and your 3 points wide open on your planter, this is a great place to throw some extra gallons, help you stretch some acres and match up maybe that in furrow and 2x2 ratio. Here's another good picture of a red ball system. Basically what we're doing here is, again, we're running from the pump into the red balls and then going out the top. Same thing. We've got our gauge in line. That's a really common setup. We also do offer these trees. I call them the trees. It's where you mount the red balls, and it keeps everything real clean and nice right there. We talked earlier about the 300-gallon tanks on the John Deere 1770s on the back of them. We've done a ton of those. They work extremely well. If you've got this little hitch bracket coming out the back, we can make you brackets and get you the tank to add 300 gallons onto that tractor, onto that planter. This planter, you may have seen it on our YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook page this week. This is a new 1795. They put a Surefire tank here in the center, and then we added the 150-gallon wing tanks out here on each side. We did the custom brackets, and we plumbed up the entire in-furrow system, I guess it would be. But yeah, this works really well to stretch your gallons per acre. And again, it's not really a good factory option. On Kinseys, Kinseys kind of stack their tanks out in front over top of the row units. We can certainly handle that. They typically stack 150 side by side, and we've set up a lot of them. A lot of people will split these tanks. So if you've got 6 of them, you'll use 4 of them for 2x2 and 2 of them for your in-furrow. That's real common. We can set those up and do them in any way. Here's a little 1780 that Kurt put a 300-gallon on. You can see he already had some 80-gallon tanks there on each side. We put a 300-gallon there in the center for his 2x2 system. Here's a 1795. We put a 1223. We stuck a 300-gallon tank right there in the center. This thing folds up real nice and tight whenever he's got those soybean units folded up. But 1223 1795s. We did this one last year around Wilmington, Ohio. That tank was for his in-furrow system. We ran, this is a Max-Emerge unit, and he's got the brushes. So we had to get we got the Keaton seed firmer, the quick attach, and we ran that down in there and put fertilizer in furrow with running a micro-track system on this one. Here's a bigger planter, 1770. Again, we put wing tanks on this one all the way out here right above the tires. That's a pretty slick setup right there. He's running the precision conceal through those gauge wheels. But again, we custom built those brackets, put those tanks on, something that's typically not available today anywhere else. The Yetter pull behind all steer carts. This is something I haven't brought up yet, but it's extremely popular. Yetter offers a 1,600 gallon and a 2,000 gallon fertilizer cart. It's an all steer cart, so it actually steers as you contour through the field. It'll follow your tractor tires, so whenever you turn around, you don't run over and you don't have an extra row or an extra set of tire tracks. So again, if you're looking to just maximize capacity, but you don't want to go on the planter, look at something like this. You can jump up into one of these tanks for 16 to 18,000. This is the 1775 that we had in our shop last week. Again, there's a close-up picture of those 150-gallon tanks on the wings. Here's that same 1780 that I showed earlier, but I wanted to show you these the red ball system right here. You can see we're running his in-furrow red balls here and his 2x2 red balls right here. So we've got them just stacked on that tree right on top of each other, so it's real neat and clean. I briefly mentioned earlier that we sell the Surefire tanks and pumps. Surefire is a great company that has got a lot of things figured out. I go to Surefire whenever I need a complete turnkey system. So if I have a guy who comes to me and he wants to run it through his John Deere rate controller, and I know his exact rates of 2x2 and everything about his planter, I'll call Surefire and they will put together a turnkey kit for me. Everything from red balls to the pump to the tank mounting bracket. So if you're a Surefire fan, we can offer you the complete Surefire kit. Their support is phenomenal as well. But on some of those trickier jobs, we do a custom setup rather than going through Surefire. But they're great, and they offer high pro pumps. They offer several different pumps, but we do sell those here in Ohio as well. And in fact, we are going to be doing a webinar this week with Matt Michek from Surefire about some different options and some different things going on here in Ohio to do variable rate phosphorus. Tank fittings. This is a pretty good picture. This is on that 1795 that I showed you, but you can see how we come out of the tank. We've got that valve right there you can shut off. We've got that electric pump mounted right there to run his in-furrow. But that's just a real good picture that kind of shows you the undercarriage of that tank and what's kind of going on. So that pretty much ends the pictures and everything that I've got for today on the planter fertilizer side of things. Basically, my goal was to educate you about what Fennig equipment can do. Maybe you've got a 1795 at home and you were wondering how to throw a tank on there, and I showed you a picture of that we can do that. Basically, the questions that we get and the problems that we run into have 100% to do with which pump do I use? What's your favorite 2x2 coulter? What's your favorite in-furrow unit? And how do I figure out what orifice that I need to run, and how do I make sure I'm getting on the right rates? So I already answered the pump question. We talked about that earlier. The next one was my favorite 2x2 coulter. That's going to 100% dictate on what your goal is. What do you want to do? How deep do you want the fertilizer? Do you want to do 2x2x2? Do you want single? What are you running now, and what don't you like about it? What do you want to change? We offer anything from 2 hoses spitting out the back to Martin UMO that gets it 2 inches below the soil. We can offer anything. So it all depends on your setup, what your goal is, and what you want to see. Do we go with the Keaton seed firmer or the totally tubular? Very famous question. The totally tubular puts that fertilizer underneath the seed. The Keaton seed firmer actually puts it on top and firms the seed as well. So it's a dual mode of action product. If you're putting on in-furrow insecticide or anything that needs to coat the seed, you're going to have to use that Keaton seed firmer. If you are running a product that you don't want to touch the seed, I would go with the totally tubular. If you want something to firm the seed, go with the Keaton seed firmer. So there's a lot of questions that need to get answered there. They both do a phenomenal job. How do I figure out what orifice I need? It goes back to that math equation. That math equation again, rate per acre, 10 gallons, let's say. Speed, tractor speed, when planting, let's say 5.5. Width, your spacing width in inches, 30. You take that number divided by 5940, you get 0.27. That is water. Fertilizer is heavier than water, so we change that to 0.31. That is the gallons per minute per row. So whenever you do that calibration test that I talked about, if you run your system, if you punch in there speed, if you're running a rate controller, and you do a calibration catch test in your rate controller, you punch in there 5 miles an hour, 10 gallon per acre, and you should get your 20 PSI. You should catch 0.31 gallons in a minute on that calibration test. So then you can go to TJet's chart. I've got one over there. But basically TJet shows charts of orifices, and you go down there and find that correct orifice. So it's not too hard to find your correct orifice and what you guys need. Hopefully today's webinar gave you guys some ideas on what you can do, what Fennig equipment can do, and how we can help. If you guys do have any more questions, feel free to give us a call or shoot us a text. Get on our website, follow us on Twitter. If you don't get our weekly email, we send one out every Friday. It's very informative, and it tells you exactly what we're doing that week. So that's it for today. Look forward to more webinars in the future. And if you guys have any more questions, feel free to give Fennig Equipment a call. And thanks for tuning in.